Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome one and all to another live stream. Today I am joined by a lady who I met a while back, but has actually made a heavy impression on me and my company. She is the speech designer herself, Deborah Wright, and she's all about enabling people to speak more clearly and be understood. And today is no exception. Today we are talking about a topic that beleaguers many people, myself included, accents and fast speech. So we're going to be talking about strategies on how best to deal with that. Deborah, talk to me more.
Yeah, I think one of the main things in understanding is actually our listening skills. So, strategies for dealing with fast speech is all about how we listen. And there are various tips and strategies that we can talk about. For example, there's so much out there on the internet, whether it's YouTube videos or podcasts, where you can hone in and listen and practice. So whether it's fast speech or a difficult accent, an accent that you don't understand, even, for example, if you don't understand a Scottish accent, then you can find a podcast or a YouTube video with someone with that accent and you can slow it down.
The only way I can cope with hearing people with Scottish accents these days is with subtitles.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Subtitles. Well,
I live and die by them.
That's a great trick. So there's obviously all these ways that we can learn by being proactive and actually finding that podcast, and we can play it back on slower speed. We can then imitate and mimic and try and learn the sounds that they are creating. That's just one thing. Obviously, there's the real-time situation, maybe in a work setting, which is a challenge for you. So what do you do? What would you do, Gareth, if you didn't understand someone?
Well, what I tend to do is I use a word like absolutely, and then I wait for a moment. I try and reflect in my mind the noises they've just been making, see if I recognize any of it. And then, I might fess up and say, I'm really sorry, but would you say that again and talk to me perhaps as you would a child and slower, so that I can catch on to everything you're saying. That way, it sounds like I'm almost supplicating myself and saying it's actually my problem rather than yours. And to help me out, would you slow it down a little?
That's wonderful. And you've used a word there to stop them saying absolutely, and that pause, and then engaging and jumping off what they're then saying after that, stopping them by saying absolutely, and then slowing them down.
It really helps. It really helps because it makes a natural break. It doesn't always work. I remember one particular occasion with an Irish lady who was very excitedly telling me about something, and I did that very same trick. And I said, "Would you just slow it down a little bit because I'm not catching on, and just talk to me as if you were a child." And she, sure, and then set off at full pace yet again. And after 3 times of this, I had to speak to my friend and say, "Would you stand here and just every so often whisper in my ear roughly what she's talking about?"
Yeah. So if you haven't got that translation person with you, here's a tip. I mean, obviously you are pulling out those key words for understanding, but actually to feed back to the person and say, hey, have I understood correctly XYZ? So have I understood it like this? And that's almost like feeding back, mirroring back to them what they're saying to us is active listening.
But I do think you have to own your inability to not understand at this case, and not feel stupid by it. You must feel that it's quite natural for you to be in this position, and therefore it's not a thing you have to feel embarrassed by. It's quite common, it's normal, it's something that will happen all the time. So therefore, when you say to these people, like, I'm just not understanding because it's too quick for me, don't feel like you have to do it from a point of shame. It's from a point of understanding. And in anything, it's a great compliment to them that you want to hear what they say because you think it's important.
So I was just trying your trick there, but I realized I've probably got my timing wrong to say
No,
absolutely.
I'm listening.
And you have to own your shit, maybe you could
Well,
say, in
well,
this. And
if things aren't going the way it ideally would, and part of that is a lack of understanding on your side, whether it be through fast speech accents or not understanding the concepts or the ideas they're putting across, it's down to you to fess up and say, look, I'm just not getting it, and I want to get it because I think there's something important here.
Yeah.
So if you can give them, sorry, you go.
We all know the importance. Sorry, I had just butted in there, but we all know
No.
the importance of listening. And actually, I did something absolutely wrong by trying to finish your sentence, or and that's something that's actually really unhelpful for the other person, because actually listening is so important and so key. It builds those connections. So I'll let you finish off your sentence.
I think if you can let them understand that how keen you are to understand what they're saying, that what you're saying is important to you, and that you're willing to learn from them, and also if they would come a little way on the compromise journey with you by slowing down a little bit, by maybe putting gaps between the words. That's the big thing for me. Without gaps between the words, and it all turns into one stream of consciousness. I lose where things begin and end.
If you don't understand one thing, then there's no point moving on to the next topic or the next step. And it's the same when we're practicing and when we're listening or when we're learning. And we talk about segmenting our listening, segmenting our learning, or other people call it chunking, de-chunking, reducing the size. So if you haven't understood one part, and you can practice, there's lots of audios, as I said, podcasts, YouTubes, where you can practice and put things on repetition, even marrying that repetition with something else you're doing, another activity, whether it's sport, doing a workout, walking to work, or however you get to work, just listening and practicing with people from the accent that you struggle with, or slowing down their speed and just understanding and gaining that understanding.
I work with people from abroad all the time, and one of my closest colleagues sometimes struggles with picking up what I'm saying because the word's too quick. Although I've noticed he can understand me talking faster than perhaps somebody else, because he's gotten used to my cadence and how I put things together. The way he does it is he says, Gareth, you've got to say that to me again because I want to hear it. And I think that really works.
Yeah. And there's another point that I wanted to make, because sometimes you mirror, or often in conversation, you mirror the speed or how the other person talks. And so if you take the initiative, if you try and slow that conversation down by making the pauses, by making the breaks, then maybe there's a mirroring that can happen in terms of the connection and the understanding.
Right, exactly so. It's mirroring is great, but it's very difficult to mirror if you feel like you just haven't got a clue what's going on. So I think, getting them to try and come a little way on this compromise journey where they slow down a bit, maybe they simplify the ideas a little bit, whatever it is, will then go a long way towards that ability of you to mirror them in other ways, such as looking interested, leaning in, all that good stuff.
Or the body language.
Yeah.
And I think in the same way, if you are someone who has a tendency to speak too fast, then to take that pause actually gives off a feeling for the listener of, this person is confident, this person knows what she's talking about, or he or she knows what they're talking about. And that will then give the audience almost like a feeling of relaxing and listening in.
Quite so. I found that you can, even with people who are fundamentally mismatched as far as understanding of concepts or ideas concerned, if you show willing, and if you slow down talk through with gaps and with considerate pauses, you can really increase understanding just by that very effort.
Yeah, and empathy gets you a long way.
Oh gosh,
Being
yeah.
persistent, not giving up, but actually saying, "Hey, I'm really sorry. I struggled to understand what you said. Could you repeat it, or just give me the bullet points?" I'm certainly I'm very much a visual learner, so I love looking at bullet points and just breaking down information into just what are the main points and bringing in focus.
I tell you what, by making sure that the focus is on the one thing that you need to get across, you can often get people to come on side with you and give you the space that you need to explain it to them. And it's all this active listening that really helps you do that.
Exactly. Yeah, and even, as I said before, repeating back, what the person said
I
makes
mean,
them feel understood and heard, and you're on the journey with them.
interestingly enough, I'm now going to apply this to business. So a lot of people who use speech as a method of communication are in sales. And if you're out there and you know who you are, and when you're talking to a person, especially if they're a person that you're trying to talk about a topic, and not necessarily selling to them, but at least giving them ideas about what your products or services are, and they come back with a response, repeating back to them that response gives them the assurity that you are listening to them in the first place. And if they were doing it really quickly with an accent that is hard to pick up and you repeating it back relatively slowly, that can often give them the cue that that's how the speed of the conversation should be, and will
Mhm.
naturally bring down the speed levels to a point where you both understand each other.
That's a great tip right there, and, I'd like to encourage all our listeners just to, persist and take on board these tips that we've talked about this morning.
But it's only through practice, Deborah, that I think it really sticks. I mean, Deborah, wouldn't you say that your more successful clients have achieved greatly just through practice, through reapplying and reapplying and reapplying?
Absolutely, and it's certainly those sometimes it's not putting too big, um, an expectation on your, achievements. Even improving 1% is worth it, because every day, if you improve 1%, then you're gonna get better, go from better to better to better to better to better. So you want to look at just that continual improvement, and look at those small habits that can get you onto the next stepping stone.
I don't know who said this. It was either Buddha or Sun Tzu, one or the other. But the journey of 1,000 steps starts with but a single one, and you've got to keep moving forward. So never think of it as that. Oh, it's one step forward, and yes, I can't remember what that meant. It's just practice. I read a lot recently about neuroplasticity. Uh,
Mhm,
the
mhm.
fact that you may think that you'll never be able to learn something. It's often through repeating either the lesson or its result again and again that eventually it will stick. Just keep going. I promise you. Unfortunately, the older you get, the more times you need to repeat it, but it can still be done.
Absolutely. And the great thing with all the research in neuroplasticity is that we know everyone can change, oh, not change, but we can build new habits.
Oh yes,
The,
I
the,
do.
the wires have been, your brain has been wired, but you can rewire by learning something new. So you might not which can eventually overwrite maybe your past experience, but by learning something new and keep on doing it, then you get to change.
And I think that's the crux about this. Don't fall at the first hurdle because it didn't all work first time. I think there is more of a tendency to do that in the modern age. People try things once and say, "Oh no, I'll never be able to do that." I promise you, you just have to keep repeating either the whole lesson or fundamental parts of the lesson. but the more times you do it, the more likely it's going to stick. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you so much to Deborah, who is absolutely brilliant at helping people speak their minds more clearly to each other to enable better communication through the manipulation of speech and gaining the methods of better conversation. And my name is Gareth Wax from Many Purple Hats. Hopefully, I think, Deborah, we're going to be doing a more regular series of podcasts like this one. And I would say to you, if you do come across either of us or find us on LinkedIn, which is a good place to look, please do throw in comments, give us ideas, plaudits and positive commentary, always helpful. But if you just want to tell us, I hear you talking about this, but why do you never talk about that? Please just do say so, and we'll factor that in. And look, once again, thank you so much, Deborah. And all of you out there, I wish you a safe and pleasant week, and of course, great mental health. Bye-bye now.
Bye.